Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video. And yes, welcome to Snow White Movie Week. Yes. And yeah, is it obvious I'm with Snow White Movie Week and just, yeah, but anyways. But yeah, but you know, I mean, like, there's no denying that Snow White has made a bit of movie history, and most notably, the first of the 4 Snow White movies that I'm reviewing indeed made film history, and it was one of those movies, especially, you know, in the early days of movie making, it changed the film industry forever, and most notably, the industry of animation. And from there on, look what would come next in the realm of animation on the big screen, most notably. Yes. So, to kick off Snow White Movie Week, that's right, of course, I have to start with this. From 1937, Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the first ever animated feature film in America. Yes. So yeah, 1937's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Again, it changed film industry, the film industry forever, and, you know, in the realm of animation, literally just, yeah. There never was a movie like Snow White at the time. Yeah. And you know, with what Walt and his crew brought to the first ever full-length feature animated film with cells and so on, yeah, it was a game changer for sure. And the fact that Walt sacrificed everything, like, he knew that this would not be a disappointment, and he would prove to everyone who first doubted him, and to those that, well, not in a mean way, they just weren't sure if this was going to pull through. From his brother, his wife Lillian, they just didn't think that he would not accomplish this, and, you know, the public, how they reacted to this at first, but Walt was determined to show them that he knew exactly what he was doing, and this would turn out to be a masterpiece. And boy, did he show them. Yeah. Yeah, and the first things I have to say about Snow White, I think for a lot of us, and, you know, we've, you know, growing up with the Disney animated classics, and this being one of them, having seen, you know, almost the entirety of the golden age of the Disney animated feature films, yeah, I mean, I remember, jeez, the memories I have with the early Disney DVDs, most notably the 2-disc DVD sets. Well, yeah, because I remember, you know, when watching Snow White on DVD and having the magic mirror show up on the menu and playing the bonus features on disc 1 and disc 2. You know, most notably on disc 1, you know, you have Roy Disney, Angela Lansbury, and you'd come to Dopey's Wild Mine Ride. Yeah. Me geeking out on Disney DVDs, but it's true, yeah. And then when, you know, watching this later on, you know, the more times I watched this, and even when getting a Blu-ray copy of it, and, yeah, just, of course, there's no denying for me that this is a Disney animated masterpiece. And this being the first ever Disney animated feature film. What started it all? And after that, from there on, just, yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, and, looking back at it, of course, it still holds up, you know? It's still, an amazing piece of animation, material and such on the big screen. A very important piece of animation history and such. And, you know, that whole thing where, you know, what was the first ever animated film? Well, I mean, granted that this was the first animated film in America, And before came along Snow White, we had, like, say, Prince Ahmed and the German version of Reynard the Fox, if you're familiar with those two. And one or two others, and especially a few that are considered to be lost forever. Yeah. But like I said, this being the first ever animated film in America with cells and so on, yeah. And, you could just imagine people's first reaction seeing this movie when it came out in 1937. Again, at the time, there had never been a movie like Snow White. So, yeah. But yeah, just overall, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs from 1937, it's without a doubt a Disney animation masterpiece, the fairest of them all, that started it all. Just, yeah. Alright, so, with that out of the way, the first things I've had to say and so on, as always, for me, read the description / the story. The grim fairy tale gets a Technicolor treatment in Disney's first animated feature. Jealous of Snow White's beauty, the Wicked Queen orders the murder of her innocent stepdaughter, but later discovers that Snow White is still alive and hiding in a cottage with seven dwarves, had to do the fingers, 7 friendly little miners, yeah, that's what it reads. Disguising herself as a hag, the queen brings a poisoned apple to Snow White, who falls into a death-like sleep that can be broken only by a kiss from the prince. Okay, so, getting into the film itself, but actually, a little bit of background, long story short, because, yeah, like I said, Walt determined that this was going to turn out to be a masterpiece, and, at first, and if you know your Disney history, because, Walt, starting out doing a batch of short films, and he wanted to go the next step, and thus, making his way into doing feature films, and wanting to do the first ever animated feature film. And he chose Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs because it was very personal for him, because when he was about 15 years old, he saw the 1916 silent movie adaptation of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And back when he was a newsboy, and as I recall, yeah, because he and the other fellow newsboys, the newsies, were given a special treat by, going to a movie theater and, well, seeing this as a thank you and so on. And, yeah, Walt being a newspaper boy in Missouri and such, and, yeah, I mean, of course, most notably, Walt from Kansas City and Chicago, just, yeah, if you know about that part of Walt and his early childhood, most notably how he worked for his father, and his childhood wasn't all that great, and even how it's established and talked about in Saving Mr. Banks. Pretty well done. But yeah, overall, he remembers seeing the silent movie adaptation of Snow White, and yeah, holding a special place in his heart and such, and when it came to wanting to do a full-length animated feature film, he chose Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Yeah. And, well, even after doing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Walt would go on to do more animated movie adaptations of the Grimm brothers' fairy tales. Yeah, as we all know. So, yeah. And again, Walt sacrificing everything to get this movie made. And boy, because look what would turn out for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs when it would come out, and when he would receive a special Oscar, including 7 tiny Oscars to go along with the big one, if you know about that. Yeah. Which, of course, being archived, in the Walt Disney Family Museum. Just, yeah. But that's pretty cool. Like, he and Shirley Temple being there, that famous piece of footage where, yeah, the Oscars were presented to Walt, and, yeah, the interactions between Walt and Shirley Temple, that was great. But, yeah, anyways, so, yeah, and not to mention that, when Walt and his crew first started off doing this movie, they weren't really in a big, fancy animation studio. And that's how it had been with other big-time group of animators, where they first started off in crappy buildings and such, and making masterpieces. It's like, Pixar, Point Richmond, or those that were, doing the Disney animated films during the Disney Renaissance era. And I'm sure you get the point, but just, yeah, anyways. But after the success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, well, with the money that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs made, that's when Walt Disney and his crew would have a brand new animation facade, buildings and such, for their very own. And the rest is Disney history. Yes. All right, but with background out of the way, getting into the film itself, because, yeah, first off, the music and score in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, fantastic. And I love how in the opening credits, there's a little thank you note that Walt, obviously wrote himself, thanking the staff and so on. That was great. And besides, it's obvious, and, this being the first ever animated feature film, but yeah, you get the point. And, getting a bit of live action footage with a book. And actually, I recall that, yeah, those books, from the one of Snow White, Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty, and I'm pretty sure, yeah, that also goes for the Jungle Book and the Sword in the Stone. Most of them, them residing in the Walt Disney Archives, and they've been on display. I've seen where, the books of Snow White, Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty, they've been on display, but yeah. Not to mention that, very quickly, because even, the book that was used for the Jungle Book, that was brought out of the archives for the live-action remake of the Jungle Book, which is very nice. But, alright, anyways, so, the first pages that we read, Once Upon a Time, and yeah, the stepmother to Snow White, the queen herself being very jealous of Snow White's beauty and having Snow White, work as a maid and so on. And each day, the queen asking her magic mirror, whom is the fairest of them all? And, well, that being, of course, Snow White. And the queen getting the first bit of dialogue in this animated feature film, slave in the magic mirror, come from the farther space. And, there's that whole thing where, I know that my dad brought this up before, where, because in the book it's mirror, mirror in the wall, but in here it's magic mirror, but, who cares, just, I even recall, Shrek saying magic mirror, but, well, not slave in the magic, well, just magic mirror, but then mirror, mirror, but anyways, you know what I'm talking about, but yeah. Besides, the mirror is magic, so does it matter? And yeah, and by the way, because the voice cast for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, well, yeah, all of them being uncredited. Yeah, at that time, some of them being uncredited, but later on, yeah, they would be credited. Well, I mean, it's like most notably, Alice in Wonderland and the Jungle Book. The voice cast would be credited, but yeah, anyways. So yeah, the evil queen being voiced by the late Lucille Laverne, yeah. And the magic mirror being voiced by the late Maureen Olson, yeah, I think I'm saying that right. And the magic mirror telling the queen that, whom is fairest of them all still is of course, and how he describes who this person is, reveal her name, and yeah, and the magic mirror, saying, by describing her, lips red as the rose, hair black as ebony, skin white as snow, and by laying out those descriptions on describing whom it is being fairest of them all, the queen, of course, knows that it's Snow White. Yeah. And of course, seeing Snow White herself scrubbing steps and getting more water from a well, and Snow White being voiced by the late Adriana Caslotti, if I'm saying her last name right. I heard where, she was disappointed that she never came back to do something else, Disney animation or something, and she sued Walt Disney. If anybody knows about that, but I don't know, I mean, I'd like to think things were patched up very later on, but yeah. Not to mention that in the later years, fans would send her a lot of Snow White merchandise and such, and if anybody's seen this on YouTube where, a few people pay a visit at her house and we get a tour of her house and she's doing a bit of Snow White. Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, her being the both speaking and singing voice of Snow White. Yeah, these white doves interacting with Snow White. Want to know a secret? Promise not to tell. And one of the first songs that we get. And yeah, because the songs in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, well, they're good, of course. And the first one being I'm Wishing. And yeah, I'm wishing for the one night, to find me, da-da-da. And, well, her singing, and there's an echo from the well, this gets the attention of someone who's passing by, and that being the prince. Yeah, and he's just called the prince, that's it. And the prince, both the speaking and singing voice, the late Harry Stockwell. And if you know Harry Stockwell, you know who his kids are, because his kids would go on to be, familiar faces and acting and such. If you know, you know. But anyways, so yeah, the prince showing up and, him out of nowhere popping in, and at the well, the reflection of the water, and, today, and yeah, the prince, and her being very startled, even the white doves and such, the pigeons, no, they're doves, and the prince continuing to sing, and, Harry Stockwell got a great singing voice, and yeah, him finishing the song in his way, and, well, the queen happens to see what's going on and getting more jealous, yep. And one white dove, landing on his finger, and just, yeah. And after that song number, well, I think, yeah, the next day, the queen summons a huntsman, telling the huntsman to take Snow White far into the forest and to find a location where she can pick wildflowers and so on. And the huntsman being voiced by the late Stuart Buchanan. Yeah. And yeah, I will say, because the only human characters in this that don't have that much to do in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs are the prince and the huntsman. However, originally there was supposed to be more of the prince, but I'll talk about that very later. So yeah, because I will talk about the deleted scenes. Yeah, but yeah, again, the huntsman being summoned by the queen to take Snow White far into the forest and flowers that she can pick, and as the queen says to the huntsman, "And there, my faithful huntsman, you will kill her." And the huntsman, he's shocked by this. "But your majesty, the little princess, silence! You know the penalty if you fail." It just, yeah, of course. And the huntsman, he has no choice. I mean, he has to oblige and follow the queen's orders. And to make doubly sure, as she says, you do not fail, bring back her heart in this. And yeah, the box. Let me tell you, because if any of you, like me, have heard about this and have seen this online, because, whether if this is official or if it's just a rumor, because, yeah, the riddle of, that when the Wicked Queen asks the huntsman to kill Snow White and bring her heart back in a box to make doubly sure that the huntsman does not fail, she has a box already. I mean, and the whole thing of, how did she get a box made that quickly? And it's out, and it's on YouTube where, the missing scene of, this box being made, specifically for Snow White's heart. If you know what I'm talking about. I mean, I don't know. I mean, does it matter? I mean, it's understandable because, she just happens to have a box, and a very, very nicely detailed box, and with a dagger going through the heart. Yeah. But that being, I assume, the locker, or something to lock up the box, anyways. But, yeah, so that's what happens, and, well, then seeing Snow White in her iconic dress/wardrobe that we see throughout the rest of the film. You realize that, yeah, she only wears 2 wardrobes in this. Her maid wardrobe and her princess wardrobe, But anyways, so herself picking flowers, and at one point, a little baby bluebird is feeling sad, and Snow White attends to the bird because, the bird has lost his parents, and Snow White pointing out to the bird, and little does Snow White know that behind her, the huntsman is about to proceed on stabbing/murdering Snow White. And when Snow White has the bird, find and locate his parents, the bird's parents, well, yep, right behind her, the huntsman, and he's almost about to do it, but then he can't do it. He just can't do it, killing Snow White, begging for Snow White's forgiveness, and warning and telling Snow White that she's mad, jealous of you, so she'll stop at nothing, and telling her that it's the queen, her stepmother, that wants her dead. And the huntsman then telling her to run away, anywhere, into the forest, into the woods, hide, go! And that's what happens, and man, here comes the sequence full of your nightmares. Especially those back in 1937 who first saw this, mainly the kids. I don't know, because, for me, when I watched this very young, I think I would know, but no, I don't think, the sequence where Snow White is running through the woods, it didn't affect me, no. I mean, there are those, not just me, that probably didn't get affected by it, yeah. But yeah, that sequence, kind of intense, especially, it's almost as though the woods, from Snow White's point of view, and us, the audience, we're seeing it, it's coming to life and terrifying her. From the tree branches, turning into fingers, faces on the trees, and logs turning into gators, and just, yeah. And it just gets crazy and chaotic, and when more trees and eyes are coming at her, and finally she collapses, sobs, and well, the woods goes from being scary to calm and peaceful, especially when we have woodland creatures step out, and the first to approach Snow White is a bunny, and her being startled by the bunny, and this causes the woodland creatures to, run and dash back, hiding in the trees and such, and Snow White assuring them that, she won't hurt them, and, having no idea what she's been through, and, feeling ashamed for all the fuss she's made, and asking them, what do you do when things go wrong? And the same blue birds that we saw telling Snow White that you sing a song, and thus, Snow White singing, and one song, that's the name of it, one song, and with a smile, because, she was singing when she was picking flowers, one song is, and the same goes for the prince, I just realized. And after Snow White singing, and now the woodland creatures, they trust and love Snow White, well, Snow White feeling very happy, and, well, she needs a place to rest, and no way that she can, sleep in any place that the woodland creatures, how they sleep and such, like underground or in a bird's nest. However, the woodland creatures know a place where Snow White can rest her head and so on, and a small sequence where they're guiding her through the woods, and up to when they find a little cottage, and yep, just like a dollhouse, as Snow White says, and them approaching the dollhouse, rubbing off the fog and such, on the window. Even a raccoon does so, and apparently no one's home when she knocks, and slowly approaching, and even, at one point, she's surprised by seeing a little chair, and that startled the animals, but yeah. And Snow White slowly discovering that maybe this cottage basically has little children, little children might live here. But when discovering more of the cottage, there's a pickaxe and such, well, that's when it all comes clear to her now that it's little men. Little men live in the cottage, and also discovering that maybe they don't have a mother, because the cottage is quite dusty, and everything is, out on the tables, dirty dishes and so on. It's like if the cottage has been abandoned for quite a while or something, And that's when Snow White has an idea, and telling the woodland creatures that they'll clean the cottage as a surprise when the little men return, and thus our next song number, which being a very popular one from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Whistle While You Work. Yeah, best I could sing in that tune, but yeah. And yeah, it's a really good song, and, you know, great animation with the woodland animals, you know, cleaning this and that, and the funny stuff that they get themselves into, and just, yeah, from the deer and the squirrels, the chipmunks, and most notably the turtle. Yeah, the turtle has a lot in this movie almost, yeah. Being one of the most notable woodland animals to have almost a good amount of screen time in this, but yeah. And also the rabbits and the birds, can't forget to mention them, because that's the total of the woodland animals that are in this are deer, rabbits, birds, squirrels, chipmunks, raccoons, and a turtle. Yeah, just one turtle, but yeah. There was even a little mouse that popped in and was complaining because, like, I don't know, and there was a little spider, but yeah, but there's more animals and insects that have quick appearances, but yeah, even a spider, but yeah, anyways. But yeah, they're making good progress cleaning up the cottage, both inside and outside, and, well, right after that, and when the Whistle While You Work song finishes, we come straight next to, yeah, technically the next song number, and this is where we get our introduction of our 7 dwarves. Yep. They're singing, we dig, 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 because, yeah, they're mine workers, if you couldn't tell already, because, yeah, when Snow White discovered that there was a pickaxe, yeah, using for, you know, getting diamonds and so on, but yeah. And our 7 dwarves, not 6, those being Doc, being voiced by Roy Atwell, Dopey, who does not speak, Dopey, technically being voiced by Eddie Collins, like, Dopey makes a few noises and such, but yeah, Sleepy, and Grumpy, most notably, both of them being voiced by the late Pinto Kolvik, who, you know, had worked at Disney, and he would go on to be one of the first voices of Goofy. Yep, that's him. Who'd have thought? Because when realizing that the voice of one of the early voices of Goofy was one of the voices of 2 of the dwarves, Sleepy and Grumpy. Yeah. And also, Pinto voiced Dopey when he hiccups. Yeah. But I know I saw where he was, well, not only credited for when Dopey hiccups, but when Dopey blows bubbles. Yeah, that too. But anyways. Sneezy, being voiced by Billy Gilbert, who would also go on to voice another Disney character, which being Willie the Giant. And, you know, and one of Billy Gilbert's talents and, you know, incorporating that into Sneezy, how he sneezes, you know, just, it's funny. And Happy, being voiced by Otis Harlan, and Bashful, being voiced by Scotty Matraw. I think, yeah, I'm saying that right. But yeah, so that's our cast of our 7 dwarves, and yep, them working in the mines, and when it's time to go home, the clock rings, and thus, hi-ho, and thus, hi-ho begins. Yep, another great memorable song from Snow White. Them, you know, packing up and heading back straight to their home, and with the diamonds that they've gotten and stowing it in bags, and Dopey, like, locking it up, and he was going to take the key with him, but, you know, he put it back, hanging it and such. Do you think it would have been wise if Dopey did take the key? That goes for not just him, but the other dwarves. They should keep that key, because who knows? But yeah. So yeah, and great animation as the dwarves are, you know, singing hi-ho and making their way back to the cottage, and yeah. And later that evening, Snow White and the woodland animals making their way upstairs, and, and the turtle, because, yeah, He's like biting and munching on the steps to make his way upstairs, yeah. And yeah, the first time that Snow White and the woodland animals make their way into the bedroom of the dwarves, and looking at the beds, and each bed carved with their names, from Doc, Bashful, and then when it comes to Sleepy, that's when Snow White starts to feel sleepy, and so do the animals, and the animals helping out tuck Snow White into bed. I think, yeah, she takes 3 beds because, I mean, they're quite small, so yeah. And even the animals tucking themselves in, and yeah. And the turtle, he's still making his way up, but then the animals, they're the only ones to wake up to this. They hear hi-ho, and yep, the dwarves are making their way back. The animals scatter back outside, and the turtle, he made his way up, and now he has to go back down, and yeah. You know, his shell, you know, conking and such. And yeah, when the dwarves show up, and Doc being the first one to discover and point out to them that our house, let's lights on. And I love Doc with his stuttering. It's pretty funny, yeah. But yeah, and Jiminy Crickets, as they say, they see that their cottage is lit up, the lights are on inside, the chimney is running, and the door's open. And they speculate that maybe it's a monster or just something. Like, they're not sure at first. And, well, by going into the cottage bravely and trying to see what's going on and to keep quiet, and, yeah. And when they discover some more that, yeah, the inside of their cottage has been clean from top to bottom. And, a nice display on the table, and, and, well, Bashful, you know, getting a whip of some flowers and such, and putting them into Sneezy's face, but he can't take it, and that's when, yeah, Sneezy having a moment of his own where, you know, he's trying not to sneeze, and the dwarves, they keep him from sneezing, but yeah, he lets out a big sneeze. And thankfully, that did not wake up Snow White. Little do they know whom is upstairs. And they even tie up his beard, like tying it up to his nose, and yeah. And the woodland animals, like, they're watching over the dwarves, and even the blue birds, the parents and the little one, they mess with the dwarves. Like, they get them to be a little scared and such, like they're pecking with their beaks, and, you know, them getting suspicious and a little scared and grumpy, telling them, it's in this room right now. And that's when the birds, like, they wink at each other, and they scare the crap out of them. And they turn their attention upstairs. Maybe it's something upstairs, and, well, whom is going to head upstairs first? Well, they turn to Dopey. They're going to have Dopey go upstairs, take the candlelight, and from there on. But Doc and the others assure Dopey that, we're right behind you. Yes, right behind you. And, well, as Dopey goes, and when he makes his way, well, nothing's happening yet, but when Snow White makes a fuss, you know, moving around the bed, and that's when Dopey panics, and, you know, and the dwarves think that it's a monster, and, well, they mistakenly think Dopey is, and they just scatter. They don't let poor Dopey out of the cottage, and Dopey, he broke the doorknob and crashed into some kitchen appliances, and yeah, making his way outside, the dwarves, they get Dopey, and they discover that's Dopey. And they ask Dopey, what happened upstairs? What was it? You know, with horns and so on, and whew, it's sleeping. And thus, all 7 dwarves go back inside, head upstairs, all of them, and yeah. And they see what Dopey had seen, and what's under the covers. And they were about to, you know, use their mind-working pickaxe and tinsels, and yeah, they were about to kill whatever it was, but thankfully they don't, when it's discovered that, yeah, underneath the sheets is a beautiful girl. And yeah, and like, from Sneezy to Bashful, their comments, she's mighty pretty, she's beautiful, just like a angel. But Grumpy, he doesn't like this, and doesn't want her in their cottage, and, you know, let her wake up, she's not welcome here, and so on. And yeah, she does wake up, and yeah, and Snow White being surprisingly greeted by the dwarves, and yeah, how do you do, as she asks, and yeah, oh, you can talk, when Grumpy says, how do you do what? And then Snow White saying, oh, don't tell me, let me guess, you're Doc, you're Bashful, and so on. Yeah, you must be Grumpy. We know who we are. Just, yeah. And, well, the more interactions that Snow White has with the dwarves, and when she tells them who she is, and, well, they're aware of her. They know who she is. Snow White, the princess, and yeah. And Grumpy still... Okay, they know who Snow White is, but for Grumpy, only Grumpy doesn't feel that does not want Snow White staying in their cottage. Well, Grumpy, he's not just grumpy, but he's a jerk at times, especially to the cute, innocent Snow White. Oh, man. Very later on in the movie, but as I continue, But Snow White begs them for them not to let her leave, because if doing so, then she'll be killed by her stepmother, the queen. And yeah, they know who the queen is as well. And Grumpy, saying, she's no witch. I'm warning you. She could be anywhere. She could know where she is. She could even be invisible. And I love, when Grumpy, some of the dialogue that Grumpy has, and when he goes, I'm warning you. So good. Yeah, just again, the animation on the dwarves and their facial expressions, just so good. Just so good, and at that time. And still, to this day. And, well, the dwarves, they want to do whatever it takes to help and protect Snow White at all costs, and even Snow White telling them that, if they let her stay, then, she'll help cook and so on, and, cook dumplings, as Doc asks, and yeah, and hooray, she's saved. And to go ahead and bring up something else, okay, I talked about a so-called deleted scene, because with the whole box thing, but yeah, the actual deleted scenes, because yeah, if you didn't notice, right before we cut to the kettle, by the fire and such, we can see Grumpy. It's like he was almost about to say something, and apparently, because there was a deleted scene where it continues in the dwarves' bedroom, where Grumpy is still disapproves of Snow White staying. And there's a little fight between Doc and Grumpy. Yeah, because even Doc, he totally knows, Grumpy and his grumpy attitude and such, and know that Grumpy can be a handful. That's nice to see. Especially later on, what happens next with the dwarves, but until I get there. So yeah, there's that, and Snow White, don't let me ruin your happy home, I'll go, but eventually things are patched up, and that's when, yeah, Snow White discovers that the kettle is boiling and such, and her dashing down, so yeah. And the dwarves smelling it, and they're excited to eat, but supper is not quite ready yet, according to Snow White. And also, she asks them if their hands are clean, and them telling her that they've had their hands cleaned recently. Oh, recently, she asks, and that whole part where, yeah, let me see your hands, and each of them show their hands, and Happy, he did this on purpose. We can see where he just, rubs his hands on his pants, and, yeah, and Dopey showing his hands, but his sleeves go down, and Grumpy looking at his, and yeah, he's refusing to show. And Snow White giving them orders to march straight outside to wash, or you won't get a bite to eat. And Doc, well, you heard her, men. Let's go. And yeah, and Dopey, he's too distracted. He hit the other side of the door. And Grumpy, he doesn't go with them. Snow White asking him, "Are you going to wash? What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" Yeah. And he didn't see where he was going. He hit the door and yeah. And Grumpy going out. He sits on a barrel and whipping. And yeah, that was funny. And that thing he's munching on or something like farmers would, And when the dwarves, the 6 of them, besides Grumpy, they approach the tub of water, nervous and checking the water, Happy going, gosh, it's wet. And I like, with, Sneezy touching and then, it's cold too. And Doc assuring them that it'll be all right, and when Grumpy makes a comment, and then, yeah, because again, like I said, Doc being well aware, with Grumpy's attitude and such, and him being a handful, and Doc, telling the dwarves, don't listen to that old warthog. yeah, don't. And thus, Doc telling them the specific ways to wash up and such. Step up to the tub, pay no disgrace, pull up your sleeves, scoop up the water, and go brrr, brrr, and that was technically a song. Bloodle Uddle Dum. Yeah, the dwarves' washing song. They're technically singing, but not really. It's one of those, where, they're, most notably Doc is saying the lyrics, but not singing them, But at least, there's one moment where they are singing together, but, yeah. And Grumpy just, what you gonna make mad at me, make me sick, going boo, boo. Yeah. And the other comments that Grumpy would make as they're still proceeding to wash, and still, some funny animation with the dwarves bathing and such, it's funny. And Doc has had enough. By this point, has had enough with Grumpy, and, well, he and the dwarves, they secretly have a plan to, well, teach Grumpy a lesson, but also give him a wash, literally. They whistle and they circle around him, get him, they get him and such, they break the barrel and they drag him to the tub, and yeah. And Dopey is given the task to get the soap, and that's what happens. And that whole thing where Dopey is wrestling and fighting with a bar of soap. It's funny. And yeah, the dwarves just, proceeding to give Grumpy a bath and humiliate him. Well, kind of rightfully so, because after being a jerk this evening, and, giving him, curling up parts of his beard, and giving him a flower, crown, And supper is now ready, and thus, them dashing, they drop Grumpy in the tub, and, yeah. And, by the way, because another deleted scene that occurs right after this, well, them making their way, and, a deleted song number, because, with them eating soup, and, yeah, with a spoon, with a bowl, and, that was one of those, this and the scene where Doc and Grumpy fight, those were, and a third one, too, where, 4 of them, actually. There was a handful of scenes that were almost animated and complete, but not fully, and yeah, and the part where they're eating soup and how they're doing it and all that slurping, and even when Grumpy steps in and he likes the smell of it, and, he starts slurping it, Snow White telling them the right way gentlemen eat, spoon in the hand, into the bowl with a twist, and yeah. And for Dopey, well, the business with him and the bar of soap are not finished when at one point he accidentally swallows his spoon. He starts to hiccup because, yeah, when he was hiccuping when he accidentally swallowed that soap. And by the way, because I mentioned where Dopey is blowing bubbles, because, yeah, water in his head and just... And water, don't we wish that's what it would be like, because, God, a pain to get water out of your ear, we all wish we can do, what Dopey did, right? But but it's a cartoon, so yeah, that's animation, no way. But anyways, and the dwarves helping out Dopey, getting the spoon out, but along with the spoon, the bar of soap, and yeah, we finally see that, yeah, both the spoon and the soap are out of Dopey, yeah. And after that, yeah, because then we come back to the evil queen, / the wicked queen, to be more precise, and by this point, yeah, the huntsman, or so he's done his duty from the request of the queen to kill Snow White and to bring her heart back in a box, and asking the magic mirror once again, who now is the fairest of them all. And the magic mirror, the mirror does not lie, the mirror telling the queen that it's still Snow White, and, pointing out that Snow White is, living in the cottage with the 7 dwarves, and the queen, thinking that that's impossible, and, the huntsman has brought me proof, behold, her heart, and the magic mirror correcting her that it's not the heart of Snow White, it's the heart of a pig. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I wonder if that was a difficult thing for the huntsman to do. Kill an innocent pig to get its heart. I would think so. And yeah, I mean, but what else was the huntsman supposed to do? Like, he had to do something and to bring a heart in a box, and yeah. I think, thankfully, yeah, the huntsman would not meet his demise after, you know, tricking the queen and such and not getting Snow White's heart. Yeah, because what would happen next to the queen and, yeah. But anyways, but the queen, because that didn't work and the huntsman did not obey, well, she heads downstairs in the castle and into her very own laboratory, I guess you can say. Well, if you can't do it, then if the huntsman was unable to, which, yeah, you know, it all comes down to her. She'll have to do this herself, which that's what she's planning to do. It's like, you know, it's like to quote Thanos, fine, I'll do it myself. See, because, yeah, can't, like, you know, those that you sent out to do your dirty work, you have to do it yourself. But, yeah, anyways. So the queen, making her way into her special lair with potions and stuff like that, and we see another animal character, which being the raven. Yeah, the queen's raven. And, well, what the queen plans to do is disguise herself and to go into the woods to find Snow White and to do whatever she's going to do to take down Snow White. And with the disguise from mummy dust to make me old, and, you know, using, like, something, you know, to do an old hag's cackle, and, scream of fright, you know, to, make, you know, her hair old, white, and such, you know, and a blast of wind and thunder to mix it well. Now begin thy magic spell, and by drinking it, and yeah, the transformation, once again, great animation right there, especially for that time, and yeah, her turning into the old hag, yes, and the old hag and the Wicked Queen are technically the same person, right? Just the personalities to each of them are quite different, yeah, and yeah, because the old hag also being voiced by Lucille Laverne, yeah. But she's credited here as the witch, but yeah, the witch / the old hag, there you go. And I read this where, fun fact, those at you know, working with Disney wondered how she pulled that off, sounding like an old hag and such. Well, all she did was take out her dentures, her teeth and such, and thus, boom, sounding and voicing like the old hag. So, yeah. Yeah, and so seeing the queen now as the old hag / the witch, and thus, now that she's in disguise, she can proceed on how she's going to get rid of Snow White once and for all, which being, in her spell book, the Sleeping Death. Yes. And, yep, so that's what she's going to do. And after that, and a great shot where she looks straight at the camera, the Sleeping Death. And as the camera fades to black and all that, the last we get is her eyes. Oh, that's so good. And then when it comes straight to our next song number, another great one from Snow White, which being the Dwarves' second song number, the Silly Song. The Dwarves' Yodel Song. Yes. Oh, da do dee dee. Yes. That's a great, memorable, and catchy one. Yeah. And from Happy and Bashful, they get to have singing parts in that, and just, yeah. And each of the dwarves playing their own instruments, and most notably Grumpy playing the handcrafted organ, well, piano, however you call it, but just, yeah. And Dopey playing drums, and also there are times where Sleepy would deal with a fly, this, like, swarming in his face, yeah. Even, you know, Dopey deals with the fly, too, trying to kill the fly and by hitting it on the drums, and, yeah. And Snow White joining in, too, just clapping and singing some, and then it comes to, well, Happy offering Snow White a dance, and so do the others. The animals are having a good time as well. We see them out on the window, and then Dopey, along with Bashful, they dance, and Dopey gets on top of, no, not Bashful, Sneezy. Yeah, I don't want to get the dwarves mixed up. Yeah, he climbs on top of Sneezy, and yeah, that iconic thing where Dopey, you know, looks like he's tall and such, and dancing with Snow White, yeah. But, of course, it all ends with, Sneezy sneezing, of course, and causing Dopey to pew, go flying. And then the dwarves ask Snow White if she can do something. And, well, Sleepy suggesting, tell us a story. And, well, her telling the dwarf story about whom she met, the prince. And thus, we get our next song number, which is another pretty good one. Someday my prince will come. Yeah, the dwarves are enjoying it. Grumpy, not so much, but yeah, overall, it's beautifully sung by Snow White, and yeah. And after that, well, it's bedtime. The clock, ticks, and yeah, the frog popping out, and yeah. And the dwarves offer Snow White to sleep in their beds, while they sleep downstairs in the living room and so on. And, when Snow White and we, audience, think that it'll go well for the dwarves, not really, because even Dopey, he got his hands on a pillow first, and yeah, them fighting for the pillow, but it's destroyed, and only, like, one feather from the pillow, yeah, survives. Dopey uses it. And as for the other dwarves, well, the other places that they find to sleep in, yeah, because Grumpy sleeping in the kettle, right at the fireplace, while, say, Doc sleeps in the sink, Happy sleeps in the cabinets, and Sneezy sleeps right on top of Dopey, like right up on his butt and such, and and Bashful where he sleeps, and Sneezy too, and Sleepy, yeah. Sleepy and Sneezy, they both start with S. And this was a cute moment where, the fly that, at times swarmed around Sleepy, well, he settles down and sleeps on top of, Sneezy's... Sleepy's nose. I don't want to get the dwarves' names mixed up. Jeez. And yeah, everything is quiet and settled for the evening. Oh, by the way, because there was one moment where Snow White was saying her prayers, and even, asking for Grumpy to like her. But yeah, so there's that. And, well, coming back to the old hag herself, and this is where, yeah, another deleted scene that we get, actually, because we see, the old hag boiling the cauldron, and then, right after that, she dips the apple into the cauldron. Now, right there, where she's dipping the apple in the cauldron, that's where, in the final film, that's when we come back to the queen. So, if you know, you know. Seen the deleted scenes. And yeah, by using an apple to have the sleeping death in it, making the face of a skull, then it turns to red, in disguise, like, nothing to suspect with this apple, even for Snow White. Even, the old hag scaring the raven, have a bite, and yeah. But then it occurs to the old hag that maybe the sleeping death might not keep Snow White asleep for eternity, because as she looks in the book again, there is a way for the sleeping death to end by love's first kiss. But she thinks to herself that maybe that won't occur to the dwarves, and they'll bury her alive. Yeah, that's what she thinks. And her laughing about it, buried alive, ah, ha, ha, ha. Man, the laughter that the old hag gives is so good, it's so good. And her making her way down further into the castle and into the dungeons, and in a moment where she sees a skeleton in a jail cell, and saying to the skeleton, "Thirsty? Have a drink!" And yeah. And apparently, I heard this where there's a theory that maybe that skeleton is Snow White's father. Dark. I know. Jeez. By the way, I didn't bring this up early on, where if any of you, like me, have experienced writing the now-defunct Snow White Scary Adventures, most notably at Magic Kingdom, oh yeah, I have some fond memories writing that, and, how that attraction, especially when it got an update around, late 1994, being less scary, and, yeah, because retelling bits and pieces of Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, yeah. Now, if any of you are aware of the first version of Snow White's Scary Adventures, Oh yeah, more scary than the one that I grew up riding on and such, and the same goes for you. And then came Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, yeah. And if any of you have written any other version of Snow White's Scary Adventures, like, say, most notably the one at Disneyland, yeah. So I thought I'd throw that out, but anyways. So yeah, and the old hag then getting on a boat and, yeah, making her way, out of the castle and into the woods. And yeah, thus, her furthering into the woods and making her way to the cottage. Next morning, everyone's awake and, the dwarves are preparing to head back to work and, one by one, Snow White giving them a kiss on the head, a kiss goodbye. And even Dopey likes this. He goes for a second one and just, yeah. And Grumpy, he even took his hat off like the others did and just, and telling Snow White, now I'm warning you, don't let anyone into the house and so on. And Grumpy's trying to resist, but yeah, Snow White does kiss him on top of the head. Grumpy, he actually liked it, because, yeah, a bit of a soft spot shows up of Grumpy, but yeah, he goes back to his grumpy ways. Even he was distracted when he fell into a river and just, yeah, that was funny. Poor Grumpy. And when coming back to the old hag, she's still proceeding on to make her way to the cottage, and at one point, there are two vultures that show up. Apparently, the vultures, they were voiced by Jack Nill. And as for the Raven, because he's credited too, the Raven was voiced by Clarence Nash Jr., but they didn't have any voices, nor did they make a peep, any bird sounds. Why do they have voice actors? I don't know, but it's there. I'm not lying. I'm looking at it on the IMDb page. Alright, anyways, and to speed things up, because, yeah, again, the old hag making her way to the cottage, we cut back to Snow White and the animals. Snow White is making pies, and even the birds help out write off the names of the dwarves on the pies. Yeah, and the first one is Grumpy, and yeah. And the one song is reprised, and so is Hi-Ho when, yeah, they're making their way back to work today. And yeah, sure enough, the old hag shows up, pretending to be an old hag and such, an innocent one, little does Snow White realize, and the animals at first. And the old hag, noticing that, making pies, it's apple pies, and thus offering her an apple, which being the one that contains the sleeping death. And the birds, they start to realize, and when they notice the vultures, and the vultures creepily stare at them, just, yeah. And it occurs to the birds that, yeah, the old hag means trouble, and they try to stop the old hag, but Snow White tells them to leave her alone, shoo and such, and, the animals, the rest of the woodland creatures, it occurs to them some more that maybe this is the queen in disguise, and yeah, it is, and thus, the woodland creatures running to fetch the dwarves, to warn them and such, and the more we get of the turtle, because, yeah, the turtle trying to catch up to them and such, and yeah, sure enough, the woodland creatures, they find the dwarves, and yeah, they were preparing to go to work, but that's all interrupted when the animals step in. But the dwarves don't understand it at first, and they're just trying to get them to shoo and such, yeah. And when coming back to the cottage, because, from the cottage to the dwarves, yeah, the old hag convincing and encouraging Snow White to eat the apple, and by telling her at one point that it's a wishing apple. And finally, when it hits the dwarves, and thanks to Sleepy, maybe the old queen's got Snow White, and yeah, Snow White! She'll kill her! We gotta save her! And thus, they hop on the deer, and thus, the dwarves, along with the woodland creatures, running back to the cottage as fast as they can. But by the time they did show up, it was too late, because, the old hag finally convincing Snow White to take a bite, to make a wish first, and to take a bite. She does. And that's when, off-screen we hear Snow White saying that, "Ooh, I feel strange," and the dialogue that the old hag has, and when Snow White collapses. the one shot we get as well, the only thing we see of her is her hand when the apple rolls off of her hand, and yeah, the old hag, the queen laughing, and now I'll be fairest in the land, and a thunderstorm hits, and thus, when she walks out, she can see that the woodland creatures and the dwarves, they're coming after her, and thus she makes a run for it. And this is where we get to the climax, and there she goes, says Grumpy, after her, and yeah, a chase through the woods and up until they get up to a cliff and such, yeah. The old hag running for her life away from the dwarves, and even the vultures are tagging along too to this chase. And when the old hag makes her way up top, and yeah, she's trapped, but a solution for her, there's a giant boulder, and she's gonna, use a giant stick to, have the boulder crush on the dwarves, I'll crush your bones! Look out, says Grumpy, and that great shot where the old hag laughs as lightning strikes, and then when a lightning bolt hits the old hag, causing part of the top of the cliff to crumble, thus she falls to her death, and to top it off, the boulder goes down, crushing her. Yeah, and that's the end of the Wicked Queen / the old hag, and yeah, the dwarves looking down and seeing where the queen is, yeah, and the two vultures, well, them flying down, and they're going to feast on the old hag, yeah. And then after that, well, then a very sad moment where, the dwarves have Snow White on a bed, very emotional organ music is playing, and shot by shot seeing the dwarves bawling with tears, and especially Grumpy, because all that time when Snow White was being very kind and sweet and, being like a mother to the dwarves, but also Grumpy, and Grumpy, all this time he was being rude and just didn't like Snow White being present in their cottage at first. Yeah. And poor Dopey, because, yeah, how much he really liked Snow White. Yeah, it's especially Grumpy and Dopey that hit the hardest, yeah. And the woodland creatures, too, being emotional. And after that, well, a bit of text that we get where apparently, the dwarves didn't have it in them to bury Snow White, and, well, they made a special, glass coffin where she can still be seen, and yeah. And it took quite a while for the prince to find and locate Snow White, but thus he did, and, yep, him, once again, singing one song, and, yeah, the prince has finally found Snow White again. And by the way, because, like I said, we were supposed to get more of the prince originally, and another deleted scene, but only with storyboard and artwork, art concepts. The prince originally would have been held prison by the queen. Yeah, she would have had the prince be held prisoner, and we would have also had seen more human characters. The guards of the castle, which that didn't turn out to be in the final film, and however the prince would have escaped, but yeah, ultimately none of that happened in the final movie, so all that we get of the prince is at the very start of the movie where he first finds and locates Snow White, and then the next time, at the very end of the movie, where he finds her, and thus walking his way up and giving her a kiss on the lips, and, well, when he, lowers his head down, and so do the others, Snow White awakens, and the woodland creatures, the dwarves, and the prince, they're all happy to see that Snow White is awake and well, and yeah, everybody is celebrating, and, well, the prince carrying Snow White off to his horse, and, yep, they were gonna go off. Snow White says goodbye to the dwarves, and, yeah. And Snow White getting the last lines of the movie, and, well, the last line she gets, goodbye, and, yeah. They all say goodbye, and it's nice that at the end of the movie, we see Grumpy smiling and being happy and such. That's great to see. And, yeah, the prince and Snow White on his horse, riding off, and, well, the last shot we get is, well, I guess, I want to say off in the distance or something through the clouds, yeah, a castle, maybe that's where the prince comes from, I don't know, but, yeah, I assume. And by the way, more on the deleted scenes, because just one more, because where would have this been? Where would have this taken place in the film? Where the dwarves, they build Snow White a bed. Like, where would that sequence have been in the movie? It's hard to tell because, I don't know, just, yeah. Looking at it now, I mean, yeah, because, yeah, it seems that, yeah, it didn't make sense, and where would it have been in the final film? Just, yeah. But, yeah. But just, yeah, overall, the ending to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, great and happy ending. Because, yeah, they all lived happily ever after. So, there you go. So, yeah, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Again, what a classic animation gem from Disney. It changed the film industry forever, and in the realm of animation, and yeah, and it was a game changer in the industry of movie making, without a doubt. Just, yeah, just everything about Snow White is fantastic. Still it is. From the story, the characters, the songs, great and funny animation, emotional moments, you know, everything about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And, you know, knowing the facts, the history that went in the making of the first ever feature animated film in America, knowing its deleted scenes, the fun facts, and everything else. And, you know, what Walt Disney and his crew achieved in 1937. It's amazing. And by the way, because they managed to finish Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs 2 weeks, and I say again, 2 weeks before the film was released. That's amazing. And, yeah, and just, yeah, that's impressive. It really is. Just, yeah, Walt Disney, boy, did he show all of those who didn't think that this would achieve, you know, this wouldn't work, but it for sure did. Yeah, yeah. And again, without Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, we wouldn't have what would come next in the realm of Disney animation and animation in general, most notably on the big screen. Yeah, I mean, look what would come next, and, you know, future animation materials that would come, you know, the later Disney animated films, and even, say, when Pixar stepped in, we would get Toy Story and other animated, animation studios, I should say, doing, you know, their own animated feature films. Just, yeah, none of that would have happened if it had not been for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Yes. And I'm giving Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, well, if it's not obvious, 10 out of 10 stars. Yes, 10 out of 10 stars for Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And what about you guys? What did you think of Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs itself? What was your early experience watching this? Any of you that had a VHS copy of this, or, you know, watching it on DVD, digital, Blu-ray, you know, was this one of the first, you know, classic Disney animated films that you watched? What were some of your memories, you know, when, you know, checking out the bonus features, the behind the scenes, the making of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs? Any of you, like me, having experienced, you know, anything Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs at the Disney parks, most notably Snow White's Scary Adventures? What are some of your favorite moments, your favorite characters, favorite songs, anything from the film itself? Yeah, and just overall, what do you think of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs itself, and with what I've had to say, my review, and yeah, what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And so, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I'll see you guys in the next video / review. And, well, Snow White Movie Week has just begun. Stay tuned later tonight, because the next Snow White film that I'll be reviewing, and that goes for the next two after the next one that I'm reviewing later tonight, well, they're live action. And to best describe the first Snow White live action film that I'll be reviewing, well, let's just say it stars the talents of Lily Collins and Julia Roberts. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you know exactly what it is that I'm talking about. And not to mention that the title of the movie, not having Snow White's name in it, it's Mirror, Mirror. Yeah, you definitely know now. Yeah. But as I mentioned their names, but yeah. Again, stay tuned for that. Take care, and peace out. Hi-ho, 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 hi-ho.